Welcome to Cityscape Brewing. I'm Adam.
I'm Amanda.
And I'm Dennis. So today I'm joined with my good friends Adam and Amanda, and we're going to be brewing a beer for a competition that we're doing for Noda Brewing in Charlotte. Noda Brewing is doing an event called Beer and Branding. So the beer and branding event pairs up brewers that do home brewing with branding professionals in order to get them experience doing things like labels and six-pack holders and posters and things like that. But every year they give the brewers a task and assign a special ingredient to put in a beer of their choice. This year, the secret ingredient was maple syrup. So we're going to be trying to brew up a beer that tastes halfway good with putting some maple syrup in there. So we've come up with a recipe, a brown ale, where we're gonna be putting some roasted pecans and maple syrup in there for a brown ale. So it should be a really good fall beer. So I need everybody over there to hit that like and subscribe button, grab yourself a beer, and then we'll get after it. Seriously, you didn't hit that subscribe button? Go ahead and do that now.
Hit the button.
So let's talk about the recipe just a little bit, okay? So we're gonna be using Maris Otter Pale Malt on purpose because it's got more of like a biscuity flavor. We're kind of going for that kind of pancakey flavor, right? And that's why we're also using a little bit of Victory Malt and a little bit of Caramel 60. Primarily Maris Otter though for the grain bill. We're also gonna be adding some chocolate malt to give it that darker color that you're looking for in a brown ale. There's not much hops in this recipe. We're gonna be using about a 1/4 ounce of Magnum for bittering and then a little bit, about a 1/2 ounce of EKG, which is East Kent Goldings hops at about 15 minutes. That'll give it a little bit of hop aroma and flavor, but really it's gonna be showcasing some roasted nuts. What we're gonna do, we're gonna put these in our oven, we're gonna toast them, we'll show you how to do that. We're gonna add half of the maple syrup at the end of our boil process, and then a little bit left over, we're gonna be adding some either in our secondary or even at the kegging stage, depending on the maple flavor that we get after primary fermentation's done. So with that, we're gonna get our grains milled up, our water additions running, and we're gonna get after it. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, while our mash is doing its thing for 60 minutes, we have time. We're gonna go ahead and do the roasting of our pecans. And the reason we do that is it can give it a little bit of a roasty flavor, but also it will help pull out some of the oils in the nuts themselves. And that can affect head retention. So the golden rule is you can't get good head if you have oily nuts.
Ew, that's gross!
So to roast these, we're gonna put these on a baking sheet. We're going to put some parchment paper down and we're gonna let them bake at 400 degrees and one even level. But we really wanna get them toasted without getting them burnt. So if they're looking like they're getting black, stir them around or take them out or both. So making sure that they're not getting, what looks like they're getting burnt or really, really golden. And then we're going to kind of pat them dry to get some of the oils off of there. Really what we're trying to do is just toast them enough to bring out some of those oils and give them that roasty flavor. All right, so our mash is done. We're gonna go ahead and do our first vorlaughing to get our first runnings. And then we're gonna pour our 180-degree sparge water in here, let it sit for 10-15 minutes for our batch sparge process. All right, we're getting up to a boil here. I'm going to be adding a 1/4 ounce of Magnum hops for our bittering. I put some Firm Cap S in there, which will help with preventing boilovers. I'm gonna go ahead and add that.
Okay, we have about 15 minutes left in the boil. We're gonna add our Whirl Flock tablet into the boil, into the wort, and then also a 1/2 ounce of East Kent Goldings into our hop spider. In addition, we're going to add our yeast nutrient, which will support healthy yeast growth during fermentation. Want to make sure we stir that up real good. Give the hops a little bit of a stir, make sure they're not caking together. All right, we're looking good. See you back in 15 minutes.
All right, so we've taken our roasted pecans and we've tied them in a paint strainer bag. That way it's going to be easier to remove when it's finished. We're going to drop it in here to the boil for the last 5 minutes and see how it turns out.
All right, guys, we're almost to the point we're gonna be adding our maple syrup in. And so what you really wanna look for when you're buying this stuff is that it's pure maple syrup. When you're looking on the back, it really should just say pure maple syrup, nothing else. It shouldn't have any other ingredients, no other added sugars, that kind of thing. What you're gonna wanna do is add this right at flameout. And the important part is, just like when you do extract brewing kit, is that it doesn't sink all the way to the bottom and burn on the bottom of your kettle, right? And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a flameout. We're gonna add all of this, which is 12.5 fluid ounces. If you have one larger jar, just make sure you measure that out. But we're gonna add about 12.5 fluid ounces right at flame out to give it that maple flavor. And then we're gonna go ahead and get this thing cooled down with our immersion chiller. All right, we're at the 60-minute mark. We're gonna go ahead and shut off the burner. And this is where we add our maple syrup like we were just talking about. So we're gonna go ahead and slowly pour that in while stirring, just so it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. Even though the stuff is off, the flames are off, we want to just make sure we get that, just pour that right over the nutsack in there. All right, make sure you get all that in there good and stirred, and we're gonna get this thing cooled down. All right, so we've cooled this thing down. It's under 100 degrees, but it's hot. It's summertime, so it's hot. So it's gonna need the rest of the time in the fermentation chamber to cool down before we pitch our yeast. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna transfer it into our fermenter. We got that all sanitized. We use the strainer here to help aerate or catch anything else that might have gotten out of our hop spider. And then we're going to pitch our yeast once it's down to fermentation temperatures. I try to pitch it a little bit early for dry yeast. We're using US 04, which will probably go about 75 or just under that to pitch, and then it's at 67 or so while we're fermenting. All right, guys, now it's been about 2 weeks since our brew date. So we let that beer completely ferment out for the first week. I let it condition at room temperature around 70 degrees for that second week. After that second week, I went ahead and I cold crashed that thing down to about upper 30s or so, and then I kegged it. After that, and it got into the keg, I actually let it carb up for a few days and tasted it to see how much maple syrup flavor and the pecan flavor that we were getting in the beer. And actually, surprisingly, I could get a little bit, or I could, of course, get the pecans, the roasted pecan flavor, but I did not get as much of the maple syrup flavor as I was kind of hoping for, but I kind of expected that at the same time because those sugars and the maple syrup were going to ferment out as part of the yeast. So again, we were using that maple syrup because we have to in this recipe. It's got to be the showcase, the front and center ingredient that we're going to be doing for this type of competition. And so I went ahead and then I added about 6 ounces more of that pure maple syrup into the keg, let that rock it back and forth a little bit, that mix up. The pure maple syrup is very liquidy, and so it's not like a simple syrup that'll go right all the way down to the bottom. You know, like if you bought like the log cabin version off of the grocery store shelf, those are like an imitation syrup. The pure maple syrup is a less likely to drop out after the first couple of days because it should mix into the beer pretty well. So I'm gonna pull a beer off. We're gonna show you what it looks like. We're gonna taste it together, and then I'll give you my honest reviews. All right, here it is. Brown ale with roasted pecans and maple syrup. Called it Sticky Nuts. Because of those couple of ingredients we added, it's not the clearest of beers. It might clear out after a little while, but at the same time, I'm okay with it being a little cloudy, being that we have that kind of maple syrup look and feel going with this beer anyway. The head retention is still there. It does dissipate a little faster than a normal beer, but again, we talked about those roasted pecans and the oils that are in there, but it is holding a little bit of a head at all times, and so it's not super oily where it's dissipating, you know, way too quickly. So let's go in for a final taste. And it's a pretty solid beer. So I need the maple syrup again to be that aroma and the flavor in there first, right? That's gonna be the showcase ingredient. The judges that are gonna be reviewing this beer, they want that to be up front and center. On the back end, I get those toasty roasted pecan flavors, and then it kind of has a little bit of that bitterness to kind of help balance out the sweetness of the maple syrup. So I think this is a pretty solid beer. I would definitely brew this one again. Again, maple can be a little tricky because it ferments out with fermentation. So you wouldn't want to do this one and then put it in bottles, because that residual sugar may lead to some bottle bombs and stuff if you put that in post fermentation. However, because we put this one in our keg, the yeast that may be left in there, either we pulled that all the way out from our first couple of pints anyway, or there's not enough in there and it's now dormant because it's cold to ferment out the maple syrup. So as long as we keep this cold, we should have no problem with this maple syrup beer ever fermenting and causing bottle bombs or anything like that. So this is going to be a solid fall beer to have with friends and family around the campfire. Go ahead and check this one out. Again, as always, I will have all of the ingredients and any equipment that I used in the video description below. You can also check out my Amazon store. I have even my shirts that I wear on these videos. I have those posted in my Amazon store. You can check that out. All of the equipment that I actually used during my brew day is in there, so check out the link below. Also consider buying me a beer. If you find these videos helpful, you can buy me a beer. It's a great way to support the channel. As always, hit that like and subscribe button. Happy brewing, and cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. A way you can support the channel is just by buying me a beer. There's a button right there on the screen, and there's a link in the video description below. You can also check out the merchandise in our store, and you can hit the video on the screen right now. You know you want to.